A young woman sits motionless inside a small jungle station. She is 28 years old. A 10-month-old baby sleeps in the next room. The radio has gone silent. For days, her husband Jim had been camped on a sandbar along the Waorani River with 4 other missionaries, attempting something no outsider had ever survived: peaceful contact with the Waorani, a Stone Age tribe so violent that 6 out of every 10 of their own adults died by spearing. Jim believed they deserved to hear the gospel. He believed it enough to go. He is not coming back. The news reaches her in the quiet. Jim Elliot, speared to death, along with all 4 of his companions, on January 8, 1956. In the weeks that follow, the world watches to see what a 28-year-old widow will do. Will she take her baby and go home? Instead of packing her bags to leave, we see her unpacking her belongings to stay. She is not running from grief. She walks back into that jungle with their 3-year-old daughter Valerie, to live among the people who had killed her husband and continue the work Jim had started. And yet, whatever she said, they repeated as though it were inspired. The authority she carried had no natural explanation. She eventually meets one of the men who had killed Jim. She did not flinch. She extended her hand. She cut his hair. He looked at her and said, "Minkai, I have washed my heart. Now I will live well." In 1960, she sat in her jungle hut with a small tape recorder. On the mud floor beside her hammock sat Gikita, one of the 5 killers, telling her with vivid, enthusiastic detail exactly how he had speared her husband. When he finished, he looked at Jim's photograph and said, "So that's your husband there?" She said yes. He asked the name. She said, "Jim." He tried to say it. Then he said, "He's laughing at us. If we had known him the way we know you, he would be sitting here laughing with us today. But we didn't know. We thought he was going to eat us." Let that sit. Her name is Elisabeth Elliot, and she demonstrated the greatest act of forgiveness, not because it was easy, but because she had already surrendered everything to a God she trusted was sovereign over even this. Comment below with, "Lord, I am available." If you are ready to walk back into what broke you, sit with those who wronged you, and teach the gospel through your grief, and stay with us until the very end, where we reveal the hidden discipline that kept Elisabeth's fire burning for 50 years, enabling you to run with endurance the race God has specifically set before you. Elisabeth Howard was born on December 21, 1926, in Brussels, Belgium, the daughter of Philip and Catherine Howard, a deeply devout missionary family. She didn't choose the mission field. She was born into it. Scripture memorization, prayer, and obedience were the rhythms of her household before she could read. But here is what nobody tells you about Elisabeth Elliot. She was not the obvious candidate for anything. She was internally reserved, socially remote in a way that made public settings feel genuinely uncomfortable. Not the obvious candidate for a voice that would reach millions. The woman who would one day speak at conferences 300 days a year and broadcast to a global audience was, by her own admission, deeply awkward in a room full of people. God was not looking for the most outgoing person in the room. He was looking for the most obedient one. Her father shaped her in a way nobody could have predicted would matter. Philip Howard Sr. trained his children to see. He would take them birdwatching and quiz them on precise details, the exact markings on a wing, the color of a beak. And when guests came to the family home, he would gather the children afterward and ask, what color were their socks? What was the cut of their coat? How tall were they? Exactly. It seemed like a game. It was a formation. The girl who would one day write books that stopped missionaries in their tracks was learning, in her father's living room, to notice everything. The precision, the sensory detail, the discipline of accurate witness. At 11 years old, she started keeping a journal. The first one had "No boys allowed" scrawled on the cover. She would keep journals for the rest of her life. Decades of honest, private, unperformed writing before God. Not for an audience, not for publication, just because seeing clearly and recording faithfully had become as natural to her as breathing. God was building the instrument before he revealed the song. At Wheaton College in Illinois, Elisabeth Howard threw herself into study: Greek, linguistics, languages. She wasn't coasting on spiritual feeling. She was grinding through intellectual preparation, building tools she didn't yet know she would need. She could not have known then what those languages were for. The Greek, the linguistics, the slow discipline of learning how meaning moves between tongues. It was preparation without a known destination. God was filing the instrument for a task she hadn't been given yet. And then she met Jim Elliot. Jim was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. He was intense, spiritually volcanic, devouring scripture and writing journal entries that wrestled with eternity. He had already written this prayer in his journal: "Father, make of me a crisis man. Bring those I contact to decision. Let me not be a milepost on a single road. Make me a fork that men must turn one way or another on facing Christ in me." That prayer would be answered not only in how he lived, but in how he died. Jim had deep feelings for Elisabeth. She knew it. And for years, he said almost nothing. So she waited. She prayed. She journaled. She did not chase. This is the furnace nobody talks about. The discipline of unfulfilled longing, of holding desire open before God without grabbing for it. And it was in that furnace that her theology was first tested. Could she trust God with the thing she wanted most? She could. And then came the conversation that defined everything before it even began. Jim sat her down and said it plainly. If her calling diverged from his, if she was not sent to the same field, they could not marry. They would separate. No negotiation. Their love for God had to be greater than their love for each other, or neither was safe to follow. Elisabeth agreed without hesitation. That vow, made before the ring, before the wedding, before Ecuador, was the spiritual architecture of everything that followed. Jim had one more word for her, written in a letter she would carry for years. Wherever you are, be all there. They went to Ecuador. They married in Quito in 1953. They moved into the jungle to serve the Quechua people. She learned the language. They had a daughter, Valerie. Life was hard, purposeful, and beautiful. And Jim's eyes were already fixed deeper in. Before we get to the sandbar, we need to sit in the jungle for a moment. Because before the dramatic, the ordinary must be understood. Jim was away scouting. Elisabeth was alone with infant Valerie in a jungle station. She cooked worms. She fought dysentery. She translated scripture by kerosene lamp in a language she was still learning. In the heat, in the dark, with a baby on one arm and a pen in the other. Nobody was watching. Nobody was applauding. This is what the master message looks like before it becomes visible. A woman alone in a jungle, doing the next thing and the next and the next. Not because it was glorious, because it was what was in front of her. The secret, she would later tell millions, is doing the next thing. She had been living it for years before she gave it a name. Meanwhile, Jim and 4 other missionaries, Nate Saint, Roger Udarian, Pete Fleming, and Ed McCulley, were closing in on the most dangerous mission of their lives. The Waorani were not simply dangerous. They were a people in freefall. 6 out of every 10 adults died by spearing. Neighbors killing neighbors. Families consuming themselves in cycles of revenge with no mechanism to stop. They had never known peace. Nate Saint developed a bucket system, lowering gifts from his small plane, machetes, cooking pots, photographs of themselves, week after week, circling the jungle canopy. And then, a crack of impossible light. One Waorani man climbed into Nate Saint's plane and flew. He laughed. They laughed together. It seemed like the world was about to change. They called it Operation Auca. The world did not yet know what was happening in this jungle. But here is what you need to know about these 5 men before January 8, 1956. Each carried a weapon, and each had made a personal vow. spoken aloud, committed before God, that he would not shoot a single Waorani who did not know Jesus. They would rather die than send an unsaved soul into eternity without a chance at the gospel. They went in armed. They died unarmed by choice. Jim had already written the sermon for his own death. When the time comes to die, make sure that all you have to do is die. He had already died to self long before the spears arrived. On January 8, 1956, all 5 men were speared to death on a sandbar along the Waorani River. Elisabeth was at home with 10-month-old Valerie when the silence from the radio became a different kind of silence. Time magazine put it on the cover. The Christian world reacted with shock, with grief, and with a faith-shaking question. Was it all for nothing? The camera holds on Jim's journal. The line he wrote years before the spears, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." He knew the price before he paid it. So did she. Elisabeth Elliot did not leave Ecuador. She stayed. She began writing. She began grieving with her eyes open. And in the ruins of January 8th, kneeling beside a silent radio in the Ecuadorian jungle, she arrived at a theology forged in fire. One does not surrender to a God who is safe. One surrenders to a God who is sovereign. She held something else close. A phrase she had encountered in the writings of C.S. Lewis, a concept he called severe mercies. She did not coin it. She embodied it. God's refusals are always merciful, severe mercies, but mercies all the same. That phrase named what she had survived. Not cruelty, not mistake, not divine indifference. A mercy so costly, it cuts. She championed it for the rest of her life because she had lived it first. She would frame what she found in that silence. The will of God is never exactly what you expect it to be. It may seem to be much worse, but in the end, it's going to be a lot better and a lot bigger. And then the harder truth, the one she repeated most. Forgiveness was not a feeling she was waiting to receive. It was a discipline she chose to practice before the feeling ever came. She wrote it, prayed it, and enacted it daily as an act of the will, not the emotions. And she prayed the prayer that changed history. Lord, if there is ever anything you want me to do about the Waorani, you'll have to show me. I don't know how, or when, or where, but I am available. If this story is already stirring something in you, if you sense God calling you toward something that feels too costly, type "I will do the next thing" in the comments right now. And if you want to go deeper with this community, consider joining Cloud of Witnesses as a member. The top tier is called The Willing, because that's who God is still searching for. Hit the join button below. 2 years. 2 years Elisabeth waited, learned, and prepared. A Waorani woman named Ayuma had fled the tribe years earlier. Elisabeth and Rachel Saint, sister of slain missionary Nate Saint, made contact with her. Through Ayuma, they began learning the Waorani language. The Greek, the linguistics, the quiet years of academic preparation at Wheaton. It had never been wasted. It had always been pointing here. Every language she had ever studied in obscurity was preparation for this single assignment. But God wasn't finished with the miraculous provision. 2 more Waorani women, themselves victims of their own tribe's relentless internal violence, fled the village and walked straight to Elisabeth and Rachel. They were not converts, they were survivors, broken women who had escaped the cycle of killing, and they sat down at Elisabeth's table, and they began to teach. The door to the Waorani didn't open through strategy or a denominational program. It opened because 2 broken women walked out of a jungle and found a widow who would listen. That is the shape of how God moves. In 1958, 2 years after the massacre, Elisabeth Elliot and Rachel Saint walked into the Waorani village. Elisabeth brought Valerie. She lived among these people for 2 years, eating with them, learning from them, tending to the sick, translating scripture into their tongue. She had already written it before she ever set foot in the village. To be a follower of the crucified Christ means sooner or later a personal encounter with the cross, and the cross always entails loss. She was not surprised by the cost. She had read the contract. And when Valerie looked at the warriors around her and asked about them, Elisabeth didn't hesitate. "These are not monsters, darling. They are just people who have not heard the name." The forgiveness was already complete before she arrived. She hadn't gone to find it there. She had carried it in. And Valerie did not merely survive the jungle. She thrived in it, playing freely with the children of the men who killed her father. The wound stopped at Elisabeth. The next generation carried forward only the gospel. The warriors who had driven spears through her husband began to listen, including one man named Minkay, one of the killers. Elisabeth sat with him. She opened the Bible she had carried into the jungle and she taught him to read it. The man who had murdered her husband, slowly sounding out the words her husband had died to bring him. And when the truth of the gospel finally broke open inside him, Minkay found his own language for what had happened. Simple words, the only words he had. He said, "Minkay, I have washed my heart. Now I live well." The killer, narrating his own redemption in the very tongue Elisabeth had learned through grief. And then came the moment that no human logic contains. Phil's saint, the brother of Nate's saint, one of the 5 men killed, stood in the river. And he baptized the warriors who had murdered his brother. The families of the dead became the agents of new birth. That is not a human story. That is a resurrection story. There is one image that requires no commentary. Elisabeth Elliot, sitting quietly beside one of the men, giving him a haircut. Just scissors and forgiveness, close enough to touch. And the people reclaimed their true name. They had always called themselves Waorani, the true people. Under violence and fear, that name had seemed like a cruel irony. Now it fit. The tribe, once defined by bloodshed, became a people of peace. In time, some of the Waorani became missionaries themselves, carrying the gospel to other unreached tribes deeper in the jungle. The mission field that killed Jim Elliot became a sending church. She came back to the United States carrying a commission. Jim had written it to her in a letter before he died. 3 words that became her life's mandate. "Teach the believers, darling." He was already gone when the full weight of it settled on her. She would spend the rest of her life obeying those 3 words, not building a platform, fulfilling an assignment. Through Gates of Splendor was published in 1957. Christianity Today eventually ranked it number 9 on its list of books that most influenced evangelicals in the 20th century. Wheaton scholar Dr. Catherine Long called it the key missionary book of the second half of the 20th century. Thousands felt called into ministry through its pages, not because Elisabeth made the mission field sound glamorous, but because she made it sound real. She was on speaking circuits 300 days a year. She wrote more than 20 books. She was one of the very few women with a sustained public voice in the evangelical world of that era. She didn't seek the platform. The platform found the woman who had actually paid the price, and she was deliberate about what she was not offering. She refused to give self-help. She gave die to self-help. She never softened the cost, never promised comfort without the cross. But let me tell you something about Elisabeth Elliot that most people never knew. On the platform, she was remote, severe, almost unreachable. People waited in book signing lines and described her as cold, businesslike, even rude. She knew it about herself. She wrote about her own failure to connect in the journals she kept since she was 11. But in those journals, she was entirely different. Passionate, lonely, longing, agonized about her own writing. "I cannot do this. I cannot write this book." And still surrendering daily, without an audience. The public voice and the private woman were not the same person. When she said, "You cannot obey God and control your life at the same time," she wasn't delivering a line. She was reporting from the inside of her own life. She married again, a theology professor named Addison Leach, and those who knew her in that season barely recognized her. She was overflowing, laughing, passionate, almost giddy. The woman who had not seemed to have a great talent for joy was suddenly full of it. It was the most purely happy season of her entire life, which made what came next the most precise kind of grief. Slow, clinical, month by month, treatment by treatment, watching love disappear by degrees. She prayed specifically. The cancer continued. She prayed again. Nothing changed. She arrived, for the second time, at the edge of a grave, and at the hardest question her theology had ever faced. What do you do when God says no to something good? She refused to chase the why. She would later say the why is an unnecessary question, that if you truly trust a sovereign God, what you do next matters far more than understanding what happened last. She buried her second husband. Her spiritual discipline was not performed for an audience. It was practiced in the dark, alone, for the second time. Her radio program, Gateway to Joy, ran for 13 years. Millions of women heard her open every single broadcast the same way. You are loved with an everlasting love, and underneath are the everlasting arms. This is your friend, Elisabeth Elliot. She gave her listeners two phrases that became lifelines. The first, do the next thing. When you are overwhelmed, when grief is suffocating, when you cannot see the way forward, wash the dishes, write the letter, sweep the floor, do the next thing. The second, in acceptance lieth peace. Not a sentiment, a physical instruction. Lift your hands, open your palms, give it to him, not as a thought, but as a bodily act. She had performed that action with Jim's death, with Addison's death, with every unanswered prayer in between. Every time she opened her hands, she reported the same result. The arms underneath held. Late in life, someone asked Elisabeth Elliot what she most wanted young women to know. She didn't reach for something gentle. She said, "Do not be afraid to be a woman. Do not be afraid to be a mother. Do not be afraid to suffer. A suffering woman is a powerful weapon in the hands of God." That was not a consolation. That was a commission. And when Steve Saint, the son of slain missionary Nate Saint, the boy who had once called her Aunt Betty, was asked what Elisabeth would most want to be remembered for, he didn't mention the books. He didn't mention the radio program. He said, she would not want to be remembered as a great writer or a great speaker. She would want to be remembered as a girl, a woman who trusted God. Her third marriage, to Lars Gren, carried a weight the public never saw. Those closest to her described it as a private desert, difficult, at times lonely, shaped by a dynamic those who loved her found deeply concerning. And yet, Elisabeth, the woman who had taught a generation that acceptance is a discipline, not a feeling, lived out her own theology in the hardest possible classroom, her own home. She did not leave. She did not make the difficulty her identity or her excuse. She asked the only question she had ever known how to ask. How do I follow the Lord from inside this? And she did. For the viewer who is enduring something painful they cannot escape. Elisabeth's life inside that season answers. Suffering within obedience is not wasted. God works in every room you surrender to him. Lars cared for her tenderly through her final years. In her final years, Elisabeth Elliot lost the ability to speak. The woman who had given the world her words was left without them. Dementia silenced the voice that had reached millions. The journalist's pen stilled. The platform went dark, and the sermon continued. In silence, in surrender, in the very thing she had preached her entire life. She lived it without a single word. Elisabeth Elliot died on June 15th, 2015. She was 88 years old. When Valerie stood to plan her mother's memorial, she felt the full weight of it. The books, the broadcasts, the decades, the lives changed, the jungle, the spears. the Waorani church still standing. She said, "I cannot carry this weight of the legacy." Her husband answered simply, "It's not you who carries it, it's Christ." That was Elisabeth's message. From the first entry in that 11-year-old girl's journal to the last silent days in her husband's arms, she did not build a legacy. She trusted a Lord. The legacy was his. The fruit was his. She was, as she always wanted to be, just a woman who trusted God. You stayed. Here is what kept her. Not the dramatic return to the jungle, not the books, not the platform. The hidden discipline beneath everything Elisabeth Elliot ever did was this: she never asked why. She only ever asked what next. Every morning, whether she had buried a husband, was sitting with a killer, or was losing her own mind to dementia, she opened her hands, said, "In acceptance lieth peace," and did the next thing. That was the engine. Invisible, unremarkable, practiced in private for 60 years. That is what kept the fire burning. And it is available to you right now, today. Here is what Elisabeth Elliot's life is asking you right now. Not what you feel, not whether you're ready, not whether the cost seems manageable. It's asking, are you available? She prayed the most dangerous prayer a human being can pray. "Lord, I don't know how or when or where, but I am available." That prayer cost her everything, and it changed the world. The suffering in your life is not an interruption of your calling. It may be the very thing that qualifies you for it. The grief you are carrying is not evidence that God forgot you. It may be the credential He is building in you for the thing only you can do. The season you are enduring, the one that feels like a desert with no exit, is not outside the reach of His redemption. Obedience inside it is not wasted. Do not wait until the cost feels reasonable. Do not wait until the fear is gone. Do the next thing. Open your hands. Stay available. If this video has been a blessing to you, then consider joining our Cloud of Witnesses membership for exclusive content, early access, and a community of people who are committed to running with endurance the race God has set before them. Elisabeth Elliot walked into the jungle that killed her husband, not because she had no fear, but because she had made a choice. Obedience before comfort, surrender before safety, the next thing before the full picture. That is the price of a life that changes the world. Will you stop waiting for the cost to feel reasonable and simply say yes? Comment below with, "Lord, I am available," to declare that your life is open before God, whatever it costs, wherever He leads. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. Like and subscribe to Cloud of Witnesses for more life-changing stories of faith that will equip you to boldly fulfill the call of God in your life. This week, identify one area where grief, fear, or unanswered prayer has made you hesitate, and practice the discipline of acceptance. Lift your hands physically, speak aloud. "In acceptance lieth peace." Do this once every morning for 7 days and watch what shifts in your spirit. Now, the man who built the plane that carried the missionaries to their deaths gave his own son to be raised by the tribe that killed him. How does a mechanic and pilot go from a small garage to designing the mission that cracked open a Stone Age tribe? What did his sacrifice release? Check out this next video to discover how Nate Saint flew toward the impossible, the disciplines that made Operation Auca possible, and why your ordinary skills in God's hands can become the very hinge of history.